Morning, everyone. Oops, sorry. Good morning, everyone. We're just gonna, it's 10 o'clock and we're just gonna give maybe another 30 seconds or so for people to join the meeting. We're still getting a few people joining, but then we'll go ahead and get going. Thank you. Okay, well, it looks like they've slowed down, the participants joining have slowed down. So I think we'll go ahead and get started right on time. Uh, but just want to say welcome everyone, and thank you for attending today's workshop. We really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy days to be with us so we can get some valuable feedback on this proposed rule amendment. Do note that we are recording this workshop, so I just wanted to remind people of that. The workshop we're going to be discussing, or the workshop that we're doing today is going to be discussing some long overdue amendments to APCD's Rule 19.2, which encompasses the state and federal requirements for continuous emission monitoring systems, or SEMS for short. As you'll hear about more today, SEMS are very important devices for measuring the emissions coming from many of our local industrial facilities, and for making sure those facilities are staying in compliance with a lot of the regulations that they're subject to. Just as a introduction, my name is Nick Cormier, and I'm the new supervisor overseeing rule development here at the district. And with me today are some of my esteemed colleagues here at APCD from a few of our different divisions. From rule development, we have Archie De La Cruz, who's the lead on this particular rule change and will be providing the presentation today. We also have Janet McHugh from Rule Development, who is helping us out behind the scenes and on Zoom, just keeping us in track in general. And then we also have a few other technical experts from our compliance and monitoring divisions that you may hear from today. And we have a wealth of knowledge here that we can hopefully answer whatever questions come out. But as a quick background, back on May 17th, APCD did post a draft of the proposed amendments to Rule 19.2 on our website for public comment, and the notice was sent to interested stakeholders and owners of SEMS by mail. In terms of the proposed amendments, we are going to be accepting comments on the proposal through Wednesday, June 21st, next week. So there is still going to be plenty of time to submit any comments today, or to submit any comments after today's workshop. I think we'll go ahead and try to post a link. Janet, if you could at some point post a link to the amended rule in the chat so that everybody can have that, that would be good. So we'll make sure everybody has a link and looking at the same thing. Like I said, we'll do our very best to answer what we can today. However, if there's anything that we aren't able to answer or need some more time to research, do remember that APCD will be releasing a workshop report with our official response to comments. That usually will come out a few weeks after the workshop, and it will eventually be included in our rule package that goes to the board later this year. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that. And the workshop report, if you're signed up on Zoom today, which everybody is, we have your email addresses, and that will get emailed to the workshop attendees once it's ready. So we do have a short presentation today that's going to provide an overview of the proposed amended rule. We'd appreciate if you could hold off on your questions or comments until the end of the presentation. But if you want, you're welcome to use the chat feature in Zoom to submit your questions to us. You can do that at any point during the presentation, and then we'll get to them kind of one by one after the presentation. Optionally, if you want to raise your virtual hand using the reaction button in Zoom, you're welcome to do that to be put in the queue to provide some verbal comments following the presentation. I don't see anybody joining on phone, it looks like, so I'll skip the comments or the directions of how to do that phone. But I will be monitoring the chat feature and raise hands and throughout the presentation, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. We do have an hour and a half today, so we should have plenty of time to get into some good discussion. And we are scheduled to end around 11:30 today, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear too. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Archie, who is going to lead our presentation. So Archie, welcome to start.
All right, everyone, you guys can hear me fine? Good morning. My name is Archie, and let's just jump into it. So 19.2. Hold on here. Actually, I am kind of. All right, so just a quick overview about this role, this presentation for this workshop. I'll go through some brief background information on SAMs and a summary of the proposed amendments. That's the meat of it. We've got a compliance schedule for the rule, impacts for the rule adoption, and then the next steps once after the workshop, what the district will do and what facilities may do. And so SAMs, for those of you that may not know what they are, I think most of you guys probably know what they are, but just for anyone that may not know, to me, it's just this big black box that samples emissions from a stack and analyzes it using whatever technology we have. And then it records data, and that data is used to calculate emission standards or gas concentration standards. So a lot of technology there and a lot of pieces for SAMs. Background, like Nick said, this is a rule that's super old. Back in 1979, it was last amended. It was only amended twice. And since then, 40 CFR, Title 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations has been modified and updated many times. The main parts of the SAMs in 40 CFR are parts 51, 60, and 75, and their appendices. And there's a lot of stuff there. If you guys want to have a lot of reading information, there's hundreds of pages in the 40 CFR regarding SAMs. So definitely the update was needed. And I would like to commend Nathan, a senior chemist in our monitoring technical services group, who is our expert in all those hundreds of pages of 40 CFR for SAMs. So thank you, Nathan, for being here to help for any technical questions. If you look at the existing rule, it's so old that it doesn't even follow the old outline we have. It doesn't have an applicability. So technically, our existing rule needed to be updated so that we can make sure it's legally defensible. And so there is an applicability section that we're adding. However, with that said, our permitting group has been really good at ensuring that through the permit process, the SAMs requirements are being addressed. So even though our existing rule doesn't have an applicability section, our permits have been making up for what our rule didn't. So with that, it looks like to the district that most of the permits are complying with the proposed amendments. So essentially this rule is, like Nick said, trying to bring the 40 CFR to our rules so that we have something to justify what the requirements are. And it's a complete rewrite. So essentially we just threw out the old rule and added all this new stuff that I'll be presenting. And so here are the proposed requirements. The first thing is the applicability, section A. Since it's a complete rewrite, the main things that were taken out from the old rule was that we don't specify which emission units shall have SEMS. And also we removed which pollutant shall be monitored, and also deleted the continuous opacity monitoring requirements. So this rule is really now focusing on how the SIMs should be installed, operated, maintained, and then how its data should be gathered and used to demonstrate compliance with the emission standards or gas concentration standards. So it's the prohibitory rules that will specify which emission unit should have SEMS and which pollutant should be monitored by the SEMS. But this rule is just for how the SEMS should be operated. Definitions are subsection C or section C in the proposed rule. All the definitions are in line with 40 CFR, and the main big definition for this is the definition of SEMS, which is essentially all equipment used to determine gas concentration or emission rate standards. Moving forward to section D, we start the requirements for the SEMS. There is QC and QA/QC program that's required to be submitted, reviewed, and approved by the district. And that program should specify things where how the SEM should be installed, operated, calibrated, maintained, and the district should be notified 2 weeks prior to if any SEMs are modified. Monitoring requirements, section E. This gets into a lot of the technical stuff, so I'll just be highlighting the things in these following requirements. There's data averaging procedures. And one thing I wanted to point out was that the data gathered while the emission unit is operating, we're allowing or requiring a minimum 90% of that time to be recorded. So that if the emission unit is down, obviously we're not going to use that SEMS data. And then the 5% is allowed, is accounting for any real life situation where the SEMs are down for various reasons. Oh, and I should add that this 95% is for the operating period, which is typically a calendar quarter. We have record keeping and reporting requirements in section F. They specify emission measurements, emission downtime and maintenance records that should be kept. A record should be kept for 5 years. That's very EPA style. Quarterly reports, calendar quarterly reports, and reporting of violations from the standards. Section G and H gets into the test methods and the quality control requirements for the SEMs. And again, there's a lot of technical stuff in there in the proposed rule. What I have here, I just listed the 4 main subsections for those requirements. And the components of the SEMs are for the calibration drift, a cylinder gas audit, relative accuracy test audit, and nitrogen dioxide converter efficiency. So a lot of technical stuff in those sections. Section I, corrective actions shall be taken as soon as practicable, but not to exceed 96 hours. The quality control limits shall not be, if they're exceeded, the SEMs are considered out of control. And when the SEMs limits are exceeded in 2 consecutive quarters, the QA/QC program shall be modified or the SEM shall be modified or replaced. Compliance schedule, section J, existing SEMs, which I think most of you out there are here for, you guys all have permits, shall be submitted demonstrating compliance by June 2024, which is contingent on board approval, and we're aiming for board approval before the end of this year. New SEMs, they'll be required to comply upon initial startup, just as part of our permit application program. The impacts of the rule, the district estimates there's about 30 active permits out there with SEMs. Most of the existing permits are expected to be complying with most, if not all, the proposed amendments. If there are some permits out there that need to be modified, we can work on that with the facilities. And this rule is actually part of the state implementation plan, so we'll be going through EPA review. So one thing to point out with them is that no emission reductions or emission increases are associated with this proposed amendment. So our next steps, like Nick already said, by close of business Wednesday, June 21st, we'll be accepting comments. We'll compile all those comments. We'll come up with a district response, which I'll write up in a workshop report. That workshop report will be given to all you guys over there. So please get a hold of Janet and share your email address if you haven't done so already. And yes, we're aiming to present this to the board for adoption before the end of this year. And with that, here's some contact information. My number's there, Archie Dela Cruz, Nick Cormier, my supervisor, who gave the intro today. And we have Nathan Gutzwiller, who's our SEMS expert in-house, and also Janet for any workshop report request. So with that, I'll open it up to questions, comments.
Great, thank you, Archie. I'll just remind everyone that if you want to, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to raise your hand. I think you go under the reactions button if you're on Zoom, and then you'll have the ability to press the button that says raise your hand. Otherwise, you can also use the chat feature to type in your questions if you'd be more comfortable with doing that. So right now, I don't see anybody with a raised hand or anything in the chat, but we'll give everyone a little bit of time to collect their thoughts. Okay, I see a raised hand. Tim Sisk, you're welcome to unmute yourself and.
Yeah, good morning. This is Tim Sisk with NRG and support Carlsbad Energy Center. So a quick question. Let's see, Archie, you had mentioned that the 95% monitor availability metric was a quarterly requirement. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be, but just trying to remember back, I thought EPA Part 75 was an annual metric. So and I need to double check myself on that, but are you suggesting 19.2, that monitor availability would be that 95% monitor availability would be a quarterly metric?
Yeah, I think that's what our intent was. With the 95%, my understanding, and let me know if I'm wrong, Nathan, we borrowed from or took from South Coast because I'm not familiar that much with 40 CFR. So if you can let me know, Nathan, what Tim is saying about any possible 95% allowance in 40 CFR. But my understanding is we just took it from South Coast so we could account for some time where the SEMS, has, calibration issues or glitches that just happens, as understood that typically happens, and shouldn't be something that the facility should be penalized for. But I do believe it's for quarterly.
Correct.
Is that...
Yeah, I can add a little bit of context here probably. So the 95% has no bearing on your Part 75 reporting, right? Any of your Part 75 data availability and reporting doesn't change, right? As your data availability decreases on Part 75, you get worse substitution factors, right? Because Part 75, you actually need 100% data capture, right? So if data is unavailable, you substitute and the penalty gets worse the more that is unavailable. This is more from the perspective of most permits say that the SEMS shall be in operation at all times, which doesn't necessarily give any leeway for anything. And so this was, like Archie mentioned, borrowed from South Coast to kind of codify a little better what do we mean by the SEMS shall be available at all times. And so that allows for a little bit of downtime in the SEMS before there may be a potential enforcement action. And with that, I had one more thought here. I believe most facilities at this point are still submitting a quarterly report to the district for their SEMS. Is that correct, Tim? Do you submit quarterly to the district separate from the EPA?
Yeah, specific to 19.2 and downtime incidents events, correct.
Correct. So this is what that 95% is more geared towards, that quarterly report that you're doing to us, not relevant to your Part 75 reporting.
Perfect. No, Nathan, I appreciate the context there. That makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that'll help with any ambiguity of that, continuous definition there. So on board with that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nathan and Tim. Thank you for the question. And just a reminder, we'll certainly, anything that's asked today, we'll run the tape, so to speak, and just make sure that what we're clarifying in our workshop report is completely accurate. So we'll certainly clarify it as much as we can in the workshop report as well. But it sounds like we've gotten your question answered, so that's good. Any other comments, raised hands, questions? We have a fairly quiet group here, it sounds like.
Nathan, you did a good job drafting the rule then.
I agree. Great job to both of you. I'll give another 30 seconds or so. But like I said, just as a reminder, this isn't the end of the road, so to speak. We are have a comment period open through June 21st, and I fully recognize this is a pretty technical rule. And if there's some comments or something that we're just not, it's just not making sense, do feel free to reach out to me or Archie. We can pull Nathan in and try to get questions answered if it's something is just not clear or making sense. We want to try and get this rule as best as we can, knowing that this rule has been, really hasn't been touched in 30-40 years. So, we're going to try to do the best we can and try to update it to what the existing conditions are today. So easier said than done, but we're going to try to do the best we can with this rulemaking. I'm going to give one more chance just to make sure that we've gotten everybody's questions. Okay, well, I will go ahead and close the workshop then. But like I said, go ahead and we have our contact information on the screen. Do feel free to let us know if you have any questions, and expect to receive a workshop report. Like I said, in the next couple of weeks, we'll go ahead and email that out to folks. And I want to thank everyone for their time today, and I think we'll go ahead and close the workshop. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time today.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Nick.